My own son left me stranded on a deserted highway in another state. His words still cut through me like a blade. I don't need an extra mouth to feed in my house. Those words came from the boy I had raised with my bare hands, the boy I loved more than life itself, the boy I sacrificed everything for. There I stood under the scorching sun, an old father abandoned like an unwanted burden. But I refused to see myself as a victim. No, I was more than that. I was a man who had endured wars inside and outside of himself, a man who had carried his family through storms and famine, through sickness and grief. When Tobias, my son, returned home later that night, he found my note pinned neatly on the refrigerator. I can only imagine how his stomach twisted when he read it, because within minutes my phone lit up with his desperate calls. Once, twice, 10 times. By the time it stopped, there had been 47 missed calls. His panic was only the beginning. He had no idea what kind of justice was already unfolding. No idea what revenge was coming slow and deliberate, like winter creeping into autumn. Before I go on, please subscribe to the channel, and in the comments, tell me what time it is, where you are right now. 42 years. 42 long years I raised that boy. And this betrayal is what I got in return. My weathered hands trembled as I looked at the inheritance documents spread across the polished mahogany desk. The pen between my fingers felt heavier than any shovel I'd ever held, heavier than the weight of years of labor. My heart resisted moving it toward the signature line. Behind me, Martha's old jewelry box began to play that haunting melody, the song she adored so much on our wedding day. It had been 2 years since I buried her, and yet I still couldn't bring myself to stop that music. Every night it played on its own as if her spirit lingered in these walls. July 3rd, 2023, 9:47 p.m. The house was so quiet it ached. Tobias and his family slept upstairs under my roof while I sat alone in my study. This was my family, what was left of it. I picked up Martha's photograph. Her smile stared back at me from our 40th anniversary dinner, a smile frozen in time. She was wearing that blue dress I'd bought her, the one that made her eyes shine. I heard her voice in my mind, soft but firm, as though she sat beside me again. "Don't let our boy take advantage of your good heart, Zeb." The room still smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with the musty scent of old wood. I touched the cold band of my wedding ring, hers and mine still linked on my hand. I had never once taken it off, not even after she left me in this world alone. Tobias, he had forgotten my 68th birthday just last month. Not even a call, not even a card. When I called him myself that evening, he laughed it off. "Sorry, Dad. Work's been crazy," but I'd seen the truth. His calendar sat on the counter marked in bold letters. Golf tournament. He had remembered that clear as day. And then there was the night I nearly collapsed from chest pains 3 weeks ago. Tobias brushed it off. "Probably just indigestion, Dad. You worry too much." Not an ounce of concern. Not an offer to drive me to the doctor. Just irritation that I had interrupted his evening. I closed my eyes and I heard Martha again, her voice weak but steady from her hospital bed, when she had only days left. "Watch how he acts when he thinks he's getting something, Zeb. That's when you'll see who he really is." The documents rustled as I shoved them aside. My chest tightened, breath shallow, but my mind was clear. Through the window, Tobias's BMW gleamed in the driveway. A car he somehow afforded while still asking me for money to cover groceries. That car shone brighter than any trace of love in his eyes when he looked at me. Perhaps it was finally time to let him show his true face to the world. I stood, my joints groaning in protest after hours of sitting still. Slowly, I pushed the inheritance papers back into the drawer unsigned. Tobias would soon realize that the man he thought was weak was far stronger than he ever imagined. The house keys felt unbearably heavy in my hand as I paced slowly across the study. Through the window, I watched the shadows dance on the yard Martha had cherished with all her heart. She had planted those roses herself, kneeling in the dirt, with her soft hands humming that tune she loved, the same one the jewelry box played every night. A test. That's what she would have wanted. A way to know beyond all doubt what kind of man our son had become. Tobias could pretend, could smile, could play the part of the dutiful child when it suited him. But when the mask slipped, when the stakes were high, then the truth would appear. Tomorrow morning I would find out who my son really was. The bacon sizzled in the cast iron pan, the smell of salt and smoke filling the kitchen. Morning sunlight streamed across the counter in golden ribbons, highlighting the dust that drifted lazily in the air. 7:15 a.m., July 5th. I'd been awake since 5, going over the words in my head again and again, every syllable weighed down with meaning. The round breakfast table looked exactly the same as it had for the last 3 years. Tobias sat at the head, the spot he had claimed, as if it belonged to him by right. Joanna was to his right, her movements sharp and mechanical as she buttered bread for the kids, her eyes fixed on her plate, as though eye contact might make things more complicated. Across from each other sat Emily and Lucas, bickering over the last piece of toast, as if that crumb of bread were the most important thing in the world. Childhood innocence. They had no idea how much darkness was building in the room. My spot was at the far end, always at the far end, where I could see everyone's faces. I'd chosen it long ago because it gave me perspective. And today, more than ever, I needed perspective. Tobias sipped his coffee, already scrolling through work emails on his phone, his face lit with that same cold blue glow he always carried more faithfully than a smile for his own father. I cleared my throat, the sound louder than I intended in the fragile morning air. My coffee mug trembled slightly as I set it down on the table. "I got a call yesterday evening," I said, letting my voice carry just enough weight to draw every eye. Tobias's eyebrows lifted, his fingers pausing mid-swipe on the screen. Joanna's hand froze over the butter dish. Only the children kept moving, Emily watching me curiously, Lucas shoveling cereal as though nothing in the world could interrupt him. "They're letting me go," I continued. "Budget cuts." After 25 years. The silence that followed was suffocating. I counted it, exactly 4 seconds. 4 long, stretching seconds where I could see Tobias's expression shift first. Surprise, then something sharper, colder, like gears turning behind his eyes. Emily's small voice cut through the tension. "What does that mean, Grandpa?" I smiled faintly at her, my heart aching. "It means I won't have much income anymore, sweetheart. My pension won't cover much more than the basics." Lucas barely looked up, slurping his cereal with all the focus of a soldier in battle. But Tobias leaned back, pushing his chair just slightly away from the table. Just slightly away from me. I saw it. The recoil. The way his body betrayed his mind before his mouth ever did. "Dad," he began, his tone clipped, irritated. "I can't afford to support extra people right now. I have my own family to think about. My own responsibilities." The words landed like blows. Not sharp enough to cut, but heavy enough to bruise. The ceramic mug burned hot in my palms, but I held it tighter, grounding myself in the pain. Joanna was quick to join him, her voice trembling, not with emotion, but with loyalty. "Tobias is right, Zeb. We're barely managing our own expenses. The kids have school fees, sports gear activities. It's hard for us too." Across the table, Emily's eyes softened, her little brow furrowing. "Is Grandpa going to be okay?" she asked, her voice fragile with worry. Before I could answer, Tobias dismissed her concern with a sharp wave of his hand. "He'll figure something out." His attention had already slid back to his phone, his thumbs moving with more urgency than his words ever carried when speaking to me. And in that moment, with bacon cooling on the plate and sunlight dying across the table, I knew. The test was over. Martha had been right. When people think they stand to lose something or gain something, that's when their true faces are revealed. And my son's true face was colder than I ever imagined. There are programs for seniors, assistance options, programs, assistance options. The words echoed in my head, mechanical and detached, as though he were talking to some stranger who had wandered in from the street, not to his own father. The man who had raised him, fed him, sacrificed everything to put him through college. That cold calculation in Tobias's voice, it struck harder than Martha's death ever had. At least with her, I knew what was coming. I could prepare myself for the inevitable, hold her hand, as the light faded from her eyes. But this was a knife to the back, driven by the very hand I once held when he was a boy, afraid of the dark. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Well," I said slowly, pushing myself back from the table. "I need to think about this." Tobias didn't even lift his eyes from his phone. "You'll land on your feet, Dad. You always do." His tone was casual, dismissive, as though I were discussing a minor inconvenience instead of my life unraveling. I stood up, every one of my 68 years pressing down on my bones, heavier than they'd ever been. The kitchen, once warm and familiar, felt suddenly alien. Even the sunlight seemed harsher, glaring, exposing too much. "I think I'll rest for a while," I murmured. No one stopped me. The bedroom door closed behind me with a hollow thud. I leaned against it, my shoulders sagging beneath the invisible weight of betrayal. 7:45 a.m., and the day already felt unbearable. My heart pounded, not from climbing the stairs, but from the shock, the cold certainty of having seen my son's true nature revealed at last. The master bedroom looked untouched, a shrine to what once was. Martha's side of the bed remained neat, pillow still fluffed the way she liked it. Her vanity stood frozen in time bottles of perfume still lined in a row, a hairbrush resting on its side with strands of her silver-gray hair caught in its bristles. The ring dish beside it was empty. I wore her wedding band now alongside my own, a symbol I could never remove. 3 years. 3 long years I told myself this arrangement was temporary, that one day Tobias would thank me properly, or at least try to ease my loneliness. I walked to the dresser and picked up our wedding photo. Martha's face beamed back at me, radiant in white lace, her eyes full of promise. Next to it, Tobias's graduation portrait from 20 years ago. He'd stood so tall that day, diploma in hand, smiling wide with pride. I remembered his words as clear as if he were in the room again. "Thanks for everything, Dad. I'll make you proud." The irony seared my chest. The boy who once promised gratitude had become the man who measured me in terms of burden and expense. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching Martha's photo in both hands, my fingers trembling against the frame. Through the window, Tobias's BMW gleamed in the driveway, a monument to his priorities. A car he had bought just 6 months after moving in here, supposedly temporarily. When had I stopped questioning it? When had I stopped demanding answers? The memory replayed in my mind with cruel clarity 3 years ago, standing in this very kitchen. Tobias and Joanna had looked so desperate, then so grateful. Joanna's hands folded, Tobias's voice earnest as he said, "Just until we get back on our feet, Dad. 6 months tops. We'll contribute to utilities and groceries, of course." And me, foolish with grief, lonely after Martha's first heart attack, had opened my arms without hesitation. "Take all the time you need," I'd said. Martha always wanted a full house. I believed I was doing the right thing. I believed I was saving my family. Now, 3 years later, the house was full, but my heart had never felt so empty. But Martha had seen through it long before I ever did. I could still picture her sitting right here on this very bed 2.5 years ago. The soft lamplight had fallen across her face, outlining the fine lines of worry on her forehead. She looked at me with that knowing gaze of hers, the one that seemed to pierce through excuses, through illusions. "They're getting too comfortable, Zeb," she'd whispered, her voice raspy but steady. "When did you last see Tobias look for houses?" I had sighed, then stubborn in my defense. "He's working hard, Martha. You know how it is. It takes time to save up for a down payment." Her hand had found mine, her fingers still warm despite the illness stealing her strength away. She squeezed gently, her eyes never leaving mine. "People show their true faces when they think nobody's watching. Remember that." But I didn't listen. I told myself it was just the sickness, talking, the fatigue, the medication. I convinced myself she was being too harsh, too suspicious. But Martha had been watching. She saw it all. She noticed what I refused to acknowledge. How Tobias's contributions had slipped from $200 a month to $100, then $50, until finally there was nothing but empty promises. "I'll catch up next month, Dad, once the promotion comes through." Martha had seen the shiny BMW arrive in the driveway, while Tobias still claimed he couldn't afford to help with groceries. She'd noticed Joanna's bags from department stores, the expensive clothes, the shoes, luxuries hidden under the thin veil of, "We're barely getting by." And me, I swallowed every excuse. I convinced myself it was temporary. I wanted to believe my son wanted to see him as the hard-working man I thought I had raised. When did I become the burden in my own house? The utilities had tripled. The grocery bills had doubled. The washing machine groaned under the weight of endless cycles, the water heater rattled, the roof leaked. And yet I made excuses, always excuses. "They're young. They're trying. They'll figure it out." I pressed Martha's photo against my chest, tears blurring my vision. "Forgive me, Martha. Forgive me for being so blind, so weak." From downstairs came the low murmur of voices. Tobias and Joanna, their tones urgent, hushed. What were they discussing now? I set Martha's picture gently back on the dresser, my hands trembling not with grief this time, but with something darker, sharper. Curiosity edged with dread. It was 9:30 in the evening, the house cloaked in shadows. Their whispers floated upwards, slicing through the silence of my grief like knives. I rose slowly, my knees aching my body, weary but unwilling to stay still. My hand rested on the bedroom door, the old hinges groaning as I eased it open. The sound seemed deafening in the stillness, thunder echoing through the hallway. I froze, listened. Their voices carried on, urgent but controlled, careful not to wake the children. Whatever they were planning, they didn't want young ears to hear. The hallway stretched before me, long and dim-lit only by the weak glow of the street lamp filtering through the far window. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. I took one step, then another. Each creak of the wooden floorboards seemed to betray me, but I kept moving, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Because tonight I would hear the truth Martha had always known. Each step down the staircase was a battle against both my body and my fear. I moved with the precision of a soldier creeping through enemy territory, careful to place my weight on the boards I knew would stay silent. After 30 years in this house, I could have walked those steps blindfolded, guided only by memory. I knew every creak, every groan of the old wood. Tonight, that knowledge was the only shield I had. At the bottom, I paused, breath caught in my throat. The kitchen doorway glowed with warm light, spilling golden streaks onto the hallway floor. The steady hum of the dishwasher filled the air, masking small noises, offering me the perfect cover. But my heart hammered so loudly in my chest, I feared it would give me away. I pressed myself flat against the wall, just outside the entrance, every muscle tense. My ears strained, and then I heard it, Tobias's voice. Calm, measured, and dripping with the same cold calculation I had heard at breakfast. "This trip idea is perfect," he was saying. "We'll drive through those desert areas in New Mexico. Lots of empty space out there." My stomach lurched. I gripped the wall to steady myself, the paint cool under my trembling fingertips. Heat rose in my face as blood pounded through my veins. I fumbled at my pocket for my phone, nearly dropping it in my haste. The screen lit up, 67% battery. My thick fingers slipped against the touchscreen, clumsy with panic. First, I hit video by mistake, the camera flashing to life and pointing uselessly at the ceiling above me. My breath caught if they heard that sound. But the dishwasher covered me, somehow, by sheer luck. I forced my shaking hand to switch to voice recording, just as Joanna's voice cut into the air. Her words chilled me more than any winter storm. "And if something happens to him out there, well, old people get confused. They wander off. Heat exhaustion, dehydration. It happens all the time." Her tone was cold, factual, not a trace of pity or hesitation. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a plan. The phone trembled in my grip, but I pressed the record button and held it steady, capturing every poisonous syllable. "Exactly," Tobias responded, his voice flat, calculating. "We'll search for a while, call the authorities. Play the worried family. He just walked away from our campsite. We looked everywhere." My knees weakened beneath me. I leaned harder into the wall, my chest tight with something between rage and despair. 3 years. 3 long years of generosity. 3 years of open doors, warm meals, and shared roof. And this was the gratitude I received. Without him, Joanna continued, her voice low but sharp, the house becomes ours automatically. We can finally stop pretending to care about his stories, his needs, his constant presence. The words cut deeper than any knife. I had become nothing but an obstacle in their eyes, a burden. 3 years of playing the grateful son, Tobias sneered. "I'm done with it. This inheritance thing pushed me over the edge. I can't keep supporting dead weight." Cold sweat slicked my forehead. My shirt clung damp to my back. The summer heat pressed heavy, but the chill inside me ran deeper. My legs shook, but still I did not move. I dared not. Every word needed to be recorded, every thread of their conspiracy documented. Martha's voice rose in my memory, steady, certain. People show their true faces when they think nobody's watching. And now I was watching, I was listening. "The beauty is it solves everything," Joanna said, her voice almost gleeful now. "No more grocery bills, no more utility costs, No more medical expenses. Just us, our real family, and a house we can finally sell. And then Tobias, with finality in his tone, clear our debts. That was it. The truth laid bare, uglier than I ever feared. They were planning to erase me like a line item on a budget to turn my life into their escape plan. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles burned white. Every muscle in me screamed to storm into that kitchen to confront them, to shout the betrayal to their faces. But I stayed still, silent, recording. Because justice, I realized, wasn't just about anger. It was about proof. And I was holding it in my hand. Start fresh somewhere else. Those words were the final straw. I had heard enough, more than enough. My phone screen glowed faintly in my hand, the timer frozen at 3 minutes and 47 seconds of pure poison. Evidence. Proof. A weapon more powerful than any gun, and far deadlier for the two who had betrayed me under my own roof. I moved as quietly as I had descended, every step back up the staircase taken with deliberate care. My hand clutched the rail knuckles, pale against the polished wood. My legs shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I carried. Back in my bedroom, I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I stared down at the screen. The file sat there like a coiled serpent waiting. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. They wanted to play games with an old man's life. Then they were about to learn what kind of man this old father really was. Well, Martha, I whispered into the still air, looks like you were right all along. People show their true faces when they think no one's watching, and now I've seen them. All of them. Steam curled upward from my coffee cup as I stirred it with mechanical slowness. The rich, bitter scent filled the kitchen, masking the acrid taste of betrayal still burning in my throat. Across the table, Tobias fidgeted with his phone, thumbs twitching nervously. His eyes darted between me and Joanna, searching for reassurance, for cues. Joanna, ever the actress, nodded at just the right moments, smiled when she thought it mattered, her mask of supportive wife firmly in place. The kitchen didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage, each of us actors, each word rehearsed, every movement, part of a play. Only they didn't know that I already had the script. The children sat between us, bowls of cereal clinking with spoons, their laughter light and innocent. Emily and Lucas, blissfully unaware that their parents had spent the evening plotting their grandfather's disappearance. My heart ached for them. They deserved better than this. How did you sleep, Dad? Tobias finally asked, his tone smooth with false concern. You looked pretty tired yesterday. I lifted the cup to my lips, letting the steam cloud my face, buying myself time. A slow sip, a pause. Then I lowered it back onto the table with care. My voice was steady, appropriately weary. Not well, son. This whole situation has me worried sick. And just like that, their shoulders loosened. Relief. I could almost see it wash across their faces. They thought they had me exactly where they wanted me. Perfect, I thought bitterly. Keep underestimating me. Joanna leaned forward, her hands folded neatly on the table, her tone dripping with manufactured sympathy. These things have a way of working out, Zeb. Family always finds a way through difficult times. Family. The word nearly made me choke. Tobias cleared his throat, timing his words like a man delivering lines. Speaking of family, he began. I've been thinking about yesterday, about what I said. I was too harsh. I gave a small nod, just enough to look convinced. I appreciate that, son. These old bones were feeling pretty beaten down. What they didn't know was that my phone sat beside my coffee cup screen, dark microphone live. The voice memo was already running, capturing every word, every lie, every carefully rehearsed tone. Tobias glanced at Joanna again. She gave the faintest smile a signal. He pressed on. What if we took a family trip? His voice softened, a mimicry of warmth. Something to bring us all together, heal these wounds between us. And there it was, the trap dressed up as love and reconciliation. I kept my face neutral, my hands steady on the mug, though inside my heart thundered like a war drum. Yes, son, I thought, keep talking, keep digging. I'll let you bury yourself with your own words. Emily looked up from her cereal, her spoon-frozen mid-air eyes suddenly wide with excitement. A trip, really, where to we? Tobias leaned back in his chair, sliding into that carefully measured warmth he thought passed for sincerity. I was thinking the Grand Canyon. Remember when Mom and I took you there when you were a kid? Dad, you always said it was one of your favorite memories. The mention of Martha's name nearly cracked me wide open. My Martha, my wife, their mother, they were dragging her memory into this twisting something pure and sacred to cover their rotten intentions. It was like spitting on her grave, but I swallowed the anger, forcing my voice into something steady, something almost grateful. That sounds wonderful, Tobias. When were you thinking? His confidence swelled instantly like a salesman sensing he'd just closed a deal. Next week, I can take some vacation time. We'll make it a real adventure, just us as a family. Lucas nearly bounced out of his chair, his spoon clattering against the bowl. Grandpa, will we see real cowboys? I reached over and ruffled his hair just like I used to do with Tobias when he was his age. We'll see all kinds of amazing things, Lucas. My tone was warm, gentle, meant for the children, innocent souls who had no idea of the storm their parents were conjuring. But inside me, the fire burned colder than ever. Joanna chimed in, then her voice dripping with rehearsed enthusiasm. It would be so good for all of us. The kids loved traveling with their grandfather, and it would give us time to really talk, to work through everything. Tobias nodded, layering on his own flourish. And the drive could be beautiful. We could take the scenic route through New Mexico, see some of that famous desert landscape. The desert, of course, wide empty stretches where men disappear without a trace. I set my cup down slowly, the bitter taste of coffee grounding me. How long of a drive would that be? I asked, keeping my expression curious. 8, maybe 9 hours, Tobias said with a casual shrug. But we'd take our time. Stop whenever you need to rest. Stop whenever they needed to get rid of me, more like it. This time I allowed myself a real smile, the first genuine one since this nightmare began. But it wasn't for them. It was for Martha. For the vow I whispered at her grave, I would not die a fool. That sounds perfect, son. I think Martha would have loved the idea of us all taking this trip together. Joanna practically glowed, thinking victory was in her hands. Should we plan for next Thursday? That gives us time to prepare. I nodded slowly, deliberately, as though they had convinced me. July 12th, I said. I'll just need to make some preparations of my own for the trip. Preparations. They thought I meant clothes, medicine, a suitcase neatly packed. But the only thing I was packing was a plan. One they'd never see coming. By morning, the July sun was already beating down, heat shimmering off the driveway. The air felt heavy, like the world itself knew something was about to break. From the porch, I watched Tobias wrestle the last suitcase into the SUV, the hatch slamming shut with a sound that echoed like a coffin lid sealing. They thought they were the hunters, but every move they made only pulled the noose tighter around their own necks. 6:45 a.m., July 12th. The driveway buzzed with the kind of organized chaos only a family trip can create, except this wasn't a vacation. It was theater, a performance, and I was both actor and intended victim. Emily and Lucas darted back and forth between the house and the SUV, arms full of last-minute treasures, stuffed animals, half-charged tablets, crumpled coloring books. Their laughter rang in the humid morning air, pure and oblivious. To them, this was just another adventure. To me, it was war. The past week had been a masterpiece of double-dealing preparation. Tobias thought he'd been clever, poring over desert maps, reading survival guides, whispering to Joanna about routes where no one would hear my cries. Joanna had played her part too, with her lists of meal stops and family games to keep the kids busy. But while they rehearsed their crime, I'd been rehearsing my defense. Through an online forum for desert travelers, I'd found Mike Harlan, a long-haul trucker who knew the Southwest like the back of his weathered hands. He'd be waiting at the Desert Oasis station outside Albuquerque, a lifeline hidden in plain sight. My duffel bag sat innocently in the corner of the SUV, Martha's old quilt folded neatly on top. Beneath it, buried under shirts and toiletries, lay the supplies Tobias would never think I'd pack: a knife, water purification tablets, flare gun, satellite phone, tools of survival, tools of war, and most important of all, my real weapon waited quietly in the kitchen. Emily, Lucas, do you have your tablets for the drive? Joanna's voice cut through the commotion, sweet but tight with tension, as she mentally checked her list. Got it, Mom. Emily held hers high like a trophy while Lucas wrestled furiously with the zipper on his backpack. His determination made me smile despite myself. Children fight the smallest battles with the biggest hearts. Tobias stood by the driver's side door wiping beads of sweat from his forehead, though the sun had barely climbed. His nerves betrayed him. He wanted me dead, but he also needed me calm. "Dad, you sure you have everything? It's a long trip and we won't be stopping much once we hit the desert." The irony bit so deep I almost laughed. They weren't planning to stop at all, not for me. I patted my shirt pocket with exaggerated relief, feigning the forgetful old man they wanted me to be. "Just need to grab my reading glasses. Won't be a minute." Their eyes followed me as I turned back toward the house. My steps were slow, casual, but inside, every muscle coiled with purpose. The kitchen greeted me with a silence so heavy it pressed against my ribs. The faint smell of last night's coffee lingered. Martha's absence felt sharper than ever, but her spirit was there, steadying my hand. On the refrigerator door held in place by her favorite daisy-shaped magnet, I slid the note I had written and rewritten until the words felt carved in stone. "I overheard your conversation on July 5th about solving the dad problem during this trip. Every word is recorded on my phone and backed up. If I do not return home safely within 24 hours, my lawyer will receive copies along with instructions to contact authorities. I know about your debts, Tobias, and I know your motives. Choose wisely." "Dad." I stepped back and looked at it pinned in its perfect spot. I imagined them returning home, perhaps smug at first, eager to collect what they believed was theirs. They'd walk into this kitchen ready to divide my belongings, and then they'd see it the note that would hit like a bullet to the chest. By then it would be too late. The placement was perfect, the timing flawless, enough to make them sweat, enough to make them panic. I closed my fist once, then released it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice, about showing them that an old man still had teeth, still had claws. As I walked back out toward the car, the morning air wrapped around me like a shroud. Tobias smiled too quickly, Joanna too brightly, their masks slipping just enough for me to see the truth beneath. They thought they had written the script, but the play belonged to me now. "Are we really going to see the Grand Canyon?" "Grandpa," Lucas's voice pierced the summer air as I rejoined them at the SUV. His eyes shone with that innocent curiosity only children can still afford to carry. "We're going to see some amazing sights, Lucas," I answered, climbing into the back seat behind the children. My voice held steady, but inside I thought things that will surprise everyone. The SUV's cabin smelled faintly of new leather mixed with Joanna's vanilla air freshener. It was too sweet, too polished, like a hotel lobby designed to mask the smell of what really lingers underneath. Tobias adjusted the mirrors with precise, almost rehearsed movements, his jaw set tight. The GPS blinked cold numbers: 8 hours and 37 minutes to destination. The tank read full. Tires checked oil, fresh supplies packed neatly in labeled bins. They had thought of everything, every detail perfected for their family trip. Every detail of their perfect crime. "Everyone comfortable?" Tobias asked, his voice a shade too light, too careful. "Ready for our adventure?" Joanna chimed in, turning with a smile so bright it almost blinded. To anyone else, she would look like the picture of a loving mother. But I had seen the cracks in her mask, the whispered conversations, the way her eyes hardened when she thought no one was watching. I settled back, hands resting calmly in my lap. Only I could feel the secret weight of the hidden water bottles and energy bars packed in my luggage. My phone, fully charged, sat in my pocket like a coiled snake, and the backup battery was tucked securely in my jacket. Mike Harlan's number was etched into my mind, every digit rehearsed and written once more in careful script, folded in my wallet where no one would think to look. The SUV pulled away from the curb. I turned my head for one final glance at the house Martha and I had built into a home for 40 years. The porch swings she had loved creaked faintly in the breeze as if waving goodbye. They thought they were about to erase me from this world, reduce me to a footnote in family tragedy. But what they didn't know was that their victim had already become the hunter. The highway opened wide ahead of us, a ribbon of asphalt dissolving into the haze. Even at this early hour, the desert heat shimmered at the horizon, promising both danger and opportunity. Classic rock hummed from the radio, filling the silence that words couldn't quite touch. We passed farmland that slowly surrendered to dry scrub brush, lonely windmills and mesas rising in the distance like ancient guardians. By 12:30 p.m., we had been on the road for nearly 5.5 hours. Missouri and Oklahoma lay behind us. New Mexico stretched endlessly before us, its vastness swallowing everything. Even the illusion of safety. The children were restless. Lucas bounced in his seat, his tablet abandoned his mind, fixed on me instead. Grandpa, tell us about when you built that treehouse for Dad. Shudder. I felt the weight of Tobias's eyes flick to the rearview mirror. I smiled, meeting Lucas's eagerness with warmth. Your father was about your age, always wanting to climb higher than was safe. That treehouse. We spent 3 weekends on it. Long days with hammer and nails, short evenings full of laughter. He was my little builder back then. Emily, quiet until now, turned from her window. Dad was good with tools, she asked, surprised, as if it didn't fit the man she knew today. The best little helper I ever had, I said softly, the memory flooding back small hands, covered in grease eyes full of questions about every wrench and every nail. He could hand me the right tool before I even asked for it. Tobias shifted in the driver's seat, his discomfort visible in the tightening of his grip on the wheel. That was a long time ago, Dad. He muttered, his voice clipped, as though he could bury the memory by smothering it. For hours the pattern repeated, the children's innocent laughter, real memories that cut sharper than any blade, and Tobias's forced performance as the devoted son, his voice too kind, too measured. You comfortable back there, Dad? Want me to adjust the air? He asked once. Need to stop for a stretch. Again, 15 minutes later. Again and again, small gestures of false concern, each one more desperate, more practiced than the last. But I knew the truth. Every word, every glance in the rear view, every offer to help was part of their play. They were waiting for the desert to finish what they had planned, and I was waiting for the moment to strike back. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe yesterday had just been nerves talking, grief mixing with fatigue, fear twisting my mind until shadows looked like monsters. Maybe I'd been unfair to Tobias and Joanna, but then I'd catch it, those sharp, fleeting glances exchanged between them when they thought I wasn't watching. The way Joanna's hand lingered on the GPS screen, double-checking, triple-checking, scribbling little notes on a pad she tried to keep out of sight, and Tobias, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel as the land around us grew more barren, his shoulders stiffening as if carrying the weight of a decision he couldn't yet set down. Are we almost there? Emily groaned from the back seat, her voice thin with exhaustion. This is taking forever. Just a few more hours, sweetie, Joanna answered. Her voice was painted in sugar, but I could hear the tension beneath it, tight and brittle. Grandpa's treat, remember? I turned my gaze to the window. Mile markers flashed past each one, carrying me farther away from safety. The interstate had given way to the lonely stretch of Route 66, its glory days long gone. Civilization was thinning out like sand slipping through a sieve. Where once gas stations dotted the roadside every few miles now, they appeared maybe once every 30 sad little islands surrounded by oceans of nothing. The children had grown quiet, their earlier chatter wilted by heat and endless hours of travel. Lucas's head lolled against his seatbelt. Emily fiddled half-heartedly with her tablet before giving up her sigh, fogging the glass. I glanced at my phone. No signal. Not even a single bar. Just the blank screen mocking me. I'd researched this stretch before cell towers, sparse emergency services, few and far between. The dead zone. The kind of place where, if you screamed, the desert would be the only one listening. This country sure is empty, I said lightly, trying to sound casual as I traced the horizon where sky and sand seemed to melt together. Tobias's lips curled faintly. That's the beauty of it. His voice was low, deliberate. Pure wilderness. A man could disappear out here and never be found. The words landed like ice water down my spine. In that moment, all my self-doubt vanished. Every nagging suspicion solidified into certainty. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't stress. This was a plan. Joanna shot him a sharp warning glance, but it was too late. The mask had slipped. And when I caught Tobias's eyes in the rearview mirror, I no longer saw my son. I saw calculation, cold assessment, a predator gauging the right moment to strike. Mile marker 247 rose ahead like a tombstone. Tobias's hands flexed on the wheel, and the SUV began to slow. I really need to use the restroom, I said suddenly, forcing my voice steady, even as my heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. Can't wait anymore. Of course, Dad, Tobias replied smoothly, guiding the SUV to the shoulder, with a practiced ease that terrified me more than if he'd slammed the brakes. Take your time. The vehicle shuddered to a stop. I opened the door, stepping into the furnace of desert heat. Instantly, sweat prickled across my forehead, the air shimmering alive with mirages. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sound of the children squabbling again, their innocence sealed behind glass. Tobias climbed out as well, stretching theatrically, though he never strayed far from the driver's door. The engine continued to idle, the steady hum like a predator's growl waiting. I turned to him, meeting his eyes directly. "Thanks for this trip, son," I said softly, deliberately. "It means everything to an old man." For the briefest heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Maybe it was guilt faint and quickly smothered. Maybe just annoyance that I was dragging out the inevitable. "Nothing personal, Dad," he said finally, voice low flat. "Just business." Then it happened. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel in a violent spray. The SUV lurched forward, peeling away from the shoulder. Emily's face pressed against the back window, confusion clouding into fear. Lucas's small hands slapped the glass, his voice muffled by distance and glass. I'll never forget the sight of their wide eyes, their tears blooming as realization dawned. And then silence. The SUV grew smaller, swallowed by the rippling heat until it was nothing but a mirage dissolving into the desert horizon. I stood alone, the merciless afternoon sun blazing down the highway, stretching on forever in both directions. The silence was so complete, it pressed against my chest like a weight. My son had abandoned me, left me to die. But the desert wasn't just his weapon, it could be mine too. "Well, Martha," I thought, staring at the wavering horizon, "time to see if your old fool of a husband really paid attention to all those lessons about preparation." Heat bled upward from the asphalt in visible waves, making the world shimmer and twist as though reality itself was melting. The empty highway stretched in both directions, a black ribbon cutting through endless desert, and somewhere down that ribbon, my family, my betrayers, were speeding away. I glanced at my watch. 1:15 p.m., the cruelest part of the day. The temperature already climbing toward its peak. The sun pressed down like a hammer, turning every breath into fire. Sweat darkened the fabric of my shirt almost instantly, clinging heavy against my skin. But I forced my breathing to remain steady, measured. 40 years of labor on factory floors had taught me about endurance, about working through heat that made lesser men crumble. Machines never cared if you were tired or hurting. You either adapted or you broke. I hadn't broken then, and I wasn't about to now. First things first, assessment. I pulled my phone from my pocket, though I already knew what I'd see. No signal bars, just the cold, indifferent screen, its digital face mocking my isolation. Battery at 89%, enough for what I needed. My research had been right. This stretch of Route 66 sat squarely in a dead zone, a graveyard between cell towers. I lifted my eyes and swept the landscape. Flat desert stretched in all directions, broken only by distant mesas jutting from the earth like ancient tombstones. Scrub brush dotted the sand, too spindly and sparse to offer real shade. Not a single building, not a whisper of civilization. Traffic was scarce. In the 20 minutes since Tobias abandoned me, I'd seen only one car thunder past in the opposite lane, its driver too intent on his own horizon to notice a lone man on the roadside. Maybe another would come in 20 minutes, maybe not. Either way, I couldn't stake my survival on chance. I patted my chest, then unbuttoned my coat, peeling it open to reveal what I'd sewn in, with Martha's words echoing in my head. Always think 3 moves ahead. From the inner pockets, I drew out 2 16-ounce bottles of water condensation still clinging to the plastic from the car's air conditioning. From my pants pockets came 4 energy bars and a small bag of trail mix. Not a feast, but enough fuel to keep me walking for hours if I rationed carefully. Next, I pulled out the hand-drawn map I'd reinforced with tape, the folds creased soft from handling. I didn't need to look at it, every line was etched into memory, but seeing it again steadied me, reminded me that I wasn't as helpless as Tobias believed. Desert Oasis gas station 6 miles east. 6 miles of open desert road. Hard but not impossible. I slid a finger to the corner of the map where I'd scrawled a name and number on waterproof paper. Mike Harland. Old friend. Old ally. He'd said he'd be around this week. Tobias thought he'd left me for dead. He didn't realize I had already prepared a lifeline. 6 miles to Desert Oasis. I said aloud, my voice low, swallowed by the vast silence. Speaking the words made them real, made them less like a challenge and more like a promise. Tobias thought he'd left behind a helpless old man. But I wasn't helpless. Martha had made sure of that. She'd taught me to see beyond the obvious to prepare for broken machines and broken people with equal resolve. She taught me to fight with my mind long before I had to fight with my hands. Poor boy, I muttered, adjusting my baseball cap against the sun's glare, sliding my sunglasses into place. You don't even realize you're playing a game I started years ago. The sturdy walking shoes I'd picked for this trip, solid soles, strong grip, bit into the burning asphalt as I took my first step east. My shadow stretched thin and frail behind me, but inside I felt steel. Tobias believed he had written the end of my story, but I was only on the first page of a new chapter. My shirt clung lightly to my body-thin fabric designed to breathe to move air across skin so heat wouldn't suffocate me too quickly. The pants, heavier but necessary, shielded my legs from the merciless sun. Every choice of clothing, every stitch had been deliberate. Preparation wasn't just a habit, it was a survival instinct honed over decades. Even the money had its strategy. 220s hidden in my left shoe bills, pressed flat against the sole, where no thief would look. Hundreds folded and tucked into my belt close to my core, while a neat stack of 50s waited in my wallet disguised as ordinary cash. It wasn't just currency, it was contingency. If I made it back to civilization, those hidden reserves would buy me time, food, transportation. Options. The car's temperature gauge had glared its warning just before Tobias pulled away 97 degrees. And that was only the beginning. By mid-afternoon, the desert furnace would climb to 105, maybe more. Heat like that wasn't just dangerous, it was lethal. It didn't kill with drama. It killed quietly, sapping your strength until you lay down for just a minute and never rose again. I knew better. Training on the factory floor had drilled into me the science of survival. Pace yourself, conserve energy, hydrate in sips, not gulps. Shade was salvation, no matter how small. A brush of boulder, even the thin shadow cast by a roadside mile marker, could mean the difference between collapse and endurance. The safety posters from decades ago came back in flashes, bold letters, warning heat exhaustion kills. Lists of symptoms, dizziness, nausea, sudden fatigue. I had lectured younger men about recognizing the signs, men who thought they were invincible until they weren't. Now I repeated the words to myself, like scripture. But I also knew my body. I wasn't like most men my age. 40 years of 10-hour shifts on unforgiving concrete had built endurance into my legs, had forged a rhythm in my lungs. My heart had learned to carry me through long hours when others had collapsed halfway. I checked my phone again. 1:23 p.m. The screen glared back cruel and bright. No signal. Just the time. I folded the map carefully, tucking it into my shirt pocket close to my chest, a reminder of direction and purpose. Then I took one measured sip of water, cool metallic against my tongue, and twisted the cap tight before facing east. The desert stretched before me, endless and merciless. Heat shimmered across the horizon, bending light into illusions, mirages of water pooling in the distance, shimmering false lakes that mocked every thirsty traveler. I blinked hard, refusing to let them trick me. Somewhere out there, just beyond reach, I caught the faint low thunder of freight trucks rolling along a parallel highway. Civilization was close, maddeningly close. 6 miles. 2 hours if I kept steady. I reminded myself of the old factory wisdom: rhythm saves men. Find your pace. Hold it. Don't sprint. Don't stumble. Just endure. So I began. Left, right, breathe. Left, right, breathe. The desert sun hammered down like a blacksmith's mallet, but in this dry air, sweat disappeared almost as quickly as it formed, whisked away by invisible hands. My shirt clung, released, clung again in its own rhythm. My shoes gripped the blistering asphalt, carrying me forward. Mile 1 fell behind me almost before I noticed my body falling into the mechanical beat it had known for decades. My mind, though, drifted backward, inevitably, toward Tobias. I saw him at 8 years old, smudges of dirt across his cheeks, curiosity shining in his wide eyes as he stood with me in the garage. "Dad, how does the engine make the car go?" His small hands gripped tools too big for them, eager to help, desperate to learn. He had watched me explain pistons and combustion as though I were unraveling the secrets of the universe. "You're the smartest dad in the world." he had declared once I fixed the stubborn bicycle chain. I remembered Martha laughing softly from the kitchen doorway, apron dusted with flour from her Sunday baking. "Your father knows how to make broken things work again," she told him with pride. "That's a gift." Her words had stayed with me, echoing in the silence now. I wondered if Tobias remembered them too, or if betrayal had erased those pieces of childhood. By mile 2, I stopped briefly. One small sip of water, just enough to wet my throat, not enough to weaken my supply. Cap twisted tight, bottle returned to its pocket. Then eastward again. Left, right, breathe. This road was more than asphalt and heat. It was a test, a reckoning. I slid the bottle back into its pocket. The water wasn't cool anymore. It had taken on the desert's warmth, but even lukewarm, it was life. Each sip reminded me that survival still lay within reach. A truck thundered past on the highway, the roar of its engine vibrating through the soles of my feet. The driver didn't slow, didn't look my way. He was locked into his own mission schedule, clutched tighter than his steering wheel. To him, I was invisible, just a lone figure pushing forward on the shoulder of an unforgiving road. My thoughts shifted uninvited to Tobias. Teenage Tobias. He hadn't always looked at me with embarrassment, but once high school came, the change was steady and sharp. I remembered the flush in his cheeks after a school event when one of his friends asked me what I did for a living. "Do you have to tell everyone you work at the factory?" He hissed, later words sharp enough to cut. He didn't want grease-stained hands or steel-toed boots tied to his name. He wanted polish, prestige, a father who matched the dreams he was building in his head. By the time college arrived, the distance between us had widened into a canyon. He came home with new friends, new ambitions, new language. The questions he once asked in the garage about engines, tools, machines vanished. That space became a relic one he avoided, as if the smell of oil and steel was poison to his carefully curated identity. Mile 3 blessed me with 30 seconds of grace, the thin slice of shade cast by a metal highway sign. My body eased into it gratefully, my shirt soaked against my back, clinging like a second skin. Breathing steady, endurance intact. Heat exhaustion hadn't yet dug its claws into me. That was the one gift years of labor had given me: conditioning. I thought of those years, decades spent on concrete floors, sweat dripping into my collar while machines roared. Every paycheck counted not just for food and bills, but for Tobias's future. My factory wages had built the bridge that carried him to college, to lectures, to the polished world he thought I couldn't understand. "Dad, you don't get it. The world works differently now," he had told me, fresh from economics classes, voice dripping with the superiority of the educated. And all the while, the hands that built his tomorrow were the very hands he disdained. Mile 4 pressed harder. The horizon blurred with false hope, phantom lakes shimmering in the heat mirages that promised water and shade, but dissolved into nothing. I steadied myself, adjusting pace, conserving what strength remained. The map said the Oasis station was 2 miles ahead, but no landmark yet cut the emptiness. My mind drifted to Martha. Her final months had stripped the mask from Tobias entirely. He had no patience for her medication schedules, no gentleness for her weakness. The irritation in his voice each time he had to wait, each time she needed help, was louder than any affection. I still saw him sitting in that hospital chair, tapping his phone while his mother struggled for breath. I saw the calculation in his eyes, measuring not her pain, but her absence before it had even come. Inheritance, assets, what would be left when the machine stopped beeping? "He's not the boy you raised," Martha had whispered one evening, her voice fragile but clear, her hand squeezing mine as Tobias slipped out early, claiming work to do. "That boy died somewhere along the way. The one left behind just wears his face." Her words returned to me now, louder than the desert silence. Mile 5 cracked the horizon open. Civilization teased me with a faint shimmer of structure in the distance. Concrete, metal, maybe fuel. My phone buzzed faintly in my pocket screen, blinking with a single bar of signal as if daring me to reach. By now, Tobias would have found the notes I'd left. Maybe he'd read them. Maybe he'd laughed, dismissing them as ramblings of a man stuck in the past. Or maybe for the first time in years, he'd remember the father who once taught him how engines roared to life, who fixed bicycles with grease-blackened hands. I asked myself questions that burned hotter than the sun. When had I become an embarrassment instead of a teacher? When had 40 years of honest work that put him through school, that kept a roof over his head, become something to hide something to shame? I had spent my life fixing broken machines, believing that if I could make metal live again, I could mend fractured relationships too. But as I dragged my feet across the desert asphalt, lungs steady but heart heavy, I finally faced the truth. Some things break beyond repair. The desert oasis station grew clearer with every step. No more shimmering tricks of the desert, no more wavering illusions. It stood solid and real, a promise of relief carved against the horizon. My legs carried me faster now, each stride fueled not just by survival, but by something sharper. Anticipation. Martha used to tell me I had patience like no one else she knew. You can outlast anything, she would say, her voice gentle but certain, as though persistence alone could solve the world. Today, that patience was being tested not against a stubborn machine or a long shift at the factory, but against desert heat betrayal that had festered for years and the gnawing ache of realizing the son I raised had turned into a stranger. 2 bars of signal blinked back at me from my phone. Enough for calls. Enough for the chaos to begin. By the time I pushed open the heavy glass door of the station, the world inside exploded around me. My phone shuddered in my hand, vibrating so hard it was like holding a live wire. Buzz after buzz after buzz, the screen flooding with alerts, each one stacking on top of the last until I couldn't even read them fast enough. The sweet blast of air conditioning wrapped around me, cooling my sweat-soaked shirt, making my skin sting as overheated pores finally met relief. But even the chill of recycled air couldn't compete with the storm raging on my phone. 47 missed calls, every one of them from Tobias. The call log read like a map of desperation, the first one at 2:15 p.m. Right after they must have noticed I was gone. Then 5 minutes later. Then 3. Then 2. Until the intervals shrank into seconds, his panic spilling out through each attempt. I scrolled further. Dozens of texts from Joanna. Call us back now. Where are you? This is an emergency. 15 voicemails waited like unopened letters from a war zone, each one a little time capsule of fear. I slipped the phone to silent and slid it into my pocket. Let them sit with it. Let them feel the uncertainty that had eaten away at me for years. For once, I wasn't the one left waiting. You look like you've been walking in this heat, a voice said gently. I turned. Behind the counter stood a woman with soft graying hair pulled into a bun, eyes as kind as they were sharp. Her name tag read, Maria. You okay, sir? She asked, concern creasing her forehead. Car trouble back on the highway, I said. Not the whole truth, not the whole lie. Is the motel still open for check-in? Of course, honey. She tapped a few keys on the register. You want me to call anyone for help? Family, maybe. I almost laughed. The sound rose in my throat but stayed locked behind clenched teeth. Family, if only she knew. No, thank you, I said softly. I've got everything handled. Maria gave me a sympathetic smile and slid the registration form toward me. Her kindness stung more than Tobias's contempt ever had. As she processed my room key, I let temptation win. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Tobias's voice tight with forced calm. Dad, where are you? We stopped for gas, and when we came back, you weren't there. We're searching the area. Please call us back. I skipped forward. Voicemail 15. His voice cracked now, the calm replaced by something raw. Please, Dad, just call us back. We're worried sick. Where could you have gone? By voicemail 32, the mask had shattered completely. I found your note. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. You don't understand what you heard. Ah, yes, the note. My quiet little insurance policy written in block letters steady enough to leave no doubt. Tucked behind Martha's flower magnet on the fridge, right where they'd find it, while packing up what they thought were my remains. The thought made me smile, not with joy, but with the bitter satisfaction of a man who had finally shifted the balance of power. For years they had dismissed, minimized, belittled. But now the shoe was on the other foot. They weren't in control anymore. I was. I overheard everything that night, July 5th. Every cruel syllable, every whisper you thought the desert winds would swallow. The dad problem, you called it. Like I was just an obstacle, a burden to be moved out of the way. You didn't know my phone was running, recording every word, capturing your scheme like flies trapped in amber. That recording is now backed up, sealed away beyond your reach. And the note, oh, the note, cold, deliberate sentences, sharpened like blades. If I don't return home safely within 24 hours, my lawyer receives copies along with instructions to contact authorities. I know about your debts, Tobias. I know your motives. I had spent hours drafting those lines, trimming them, reshaping them until they were both precise and poisonous. Enough detail to rattle Tobias's pride, enough truth to crack his confidence, but vague enough to keep him chasing shadows. Ambiguity was my shield. It forced him to wonder how much I really knew, how far I had prepared. Maria slid the motel key across the counter, pulling me back into the present. Room 7, the brass tag read dull from years of use. Just down the walkway, she said warmly. Ice machines at the end, and there's a diner next door if you need something hot to eat. Her kindness was a salve I hadn't expected. For a moment, it almost made me forget the poison running in my own blood, betrayal by the people I had sacrificed everything for. I stocked up before heading to the room, bottles of cold water, electrolyte drinks, even a clean shirt from the convenience section. Each purchase felt like a small reclaiming of dignity after the desert tried to strip me bare. Then right on cue, my phone buzzed. Call number 48, Tobias again. His persistence used to mean something to me. Ambition, drive, determination. Now it only smelled of fear. I let it ring, let it buzz angrily against the table, and drank in the satisfaction of silence when it finally stopped. The motel room was small, plain, the kind of place no one remembered after a night. But the bed looked like paradise after the scorching miles I had walked. I plugged my phone into the wall, watched the screen light up with call number 49, and ignored it just the same. Let him stew. Let him taste the panic he'd so casually served me. From the thin curtains, I could see the truck lot. Tomorrow that space would hold my salvation, Mike Harlan and his Peterbilt rig, my ride out of this desert of betrayal. I whispered the numbers under my breath, 47 calls in just over 2.5 hours. A mathematician's little victory. Martha always teased me about counting everything, steps, bills, years. One day that stubborn arithmetic will save your life, she once said. She hadn't been wrong. I brewed a cup of cheap motel coffee, steam curling like ghostly fingers in the morning light, and sat at the small table by the window. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel something dangerously close to peace. And then on schedule, right when the world was beginning to believe in order again, I heard it. A low rumble rolling through the lot, steady, commanding. A blue Peterbilt semi pulled into view, chrome, catching the early sun. Air brakes hissed a sharp exhale as the beast settled into its spot. 7:30 a.m., July 13th. Exactly as promised. I had slept deeply, the kind of sleep that comes only when the worst storm has passed and the shore is finally in sight. My body was sore, but my mind was light. Peace of mind, what a rare and precious thing. The cab door swung open and down climbed Mike Harlan. 25 years of highways etched into the set of his shoulders, 55 years of sun and grit carved into the lines of his face. His eyes, gentle behind wire-rimmed glasses, found me through the window. He raised a hand in unspoken promise that I wasn't alone anymore. Right on time, he said as he stepped into the cafe, his voice solid, reassuring. I stood coffee forgotten and clasped his calloused hand with both of mine. Best sleep I've had in weeks, I said truthfully. Mike, I can't thank you enough for this. Not everyone would help a stranger. He smiled, the kind of smile born from miles of trust earned on the road. Sometimes strangers aren't strangers at all, he said. Sometimes they're just family we haven't met yet. For the first time in a long time, my chest loosened. Maybe he was right. Maybe family wasn't about blood at all. Mike waved off my gratitude with a small shake of his head, the kind of gesture a man makes when thanks feels unnecessary. The road teaches you who you can trust, he said, his voice steady, worn smooth by years of asphalt and solitude. And you, Zeb, you've got honest eyes. There was no flattery in his tone, just a simple truth. It struck deeper than I expected. Springfield's about 8 hours out with my delivery schedule, he continued. Perfect timing. Within 20 minutes, the remnants of my life, my minimal belongings, were stowed neatly in the sleeper compartment of his truck. No grand luggage, no excess baggage. Just a small collection of essentials, the kind a man carries when he has learned that possessions weigh less than memories. I slid into the passenger seat, surprised by its comfort. Mike, ever prepared, handed me a thermos of fresh coffee and a wax paper-wrapped bundle, homemade sandwiches. My throat tightened at the gesture. It had been so long since anyone had thought ahead for me, without an angle, without expecting repayment. The CB radio crackled now and then, with snippets of trucker chatter directions, weather updates, road humor, only they seemed to understand. From the stereo country, music hummed softly, a background heartbeat to our journey. Mike broke the silence after a while, eyes on the long stretch of I-40 East. Family's supposed to hold each other up, he said, not tear each other down or use one another. He didn't pry, not directly, but the invitation was there, laid plain between us like the road ahead. I gave him enough the bones of the truth. Car trouble, family tensions, a need to get back home. He nodded, no judgment in his expression, just a quiet understanding. That's what I always believed too, I said softly. Watching the New Mexico desert stretch out, then slowly surrender to the endless Oklahoma plains. 42 years raising a son, and I thought I knew what kind of man he'd grow into. Mike glanced at me briefly, then back to the road. I've got 2 kids myself, he said. Divorced 15 years now, but me and my ex, we always put the kids first. Can't imagine blood family turning on each other. That's a wound that cuts deep. The miles unfurled beneath us, and with them, conversation flowed as easily as the hum of the engine. Mike told stories of kindness along the highways, strangers offering help without hesitation, truckers sharing food tools or company in lonely rest stops. He spoke of the pride in honest work, the brotherhood of the road, the dignity in simply showing up for people. Somewhere between those stories, I began to open too. I found myself speaking of Martha. My Martha, with her sharp wit and gentler heart. I told him pieces of her careful fragments, little sayings she used to keep me steady. Mike listened with patience, then smiled. Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman, the kind who saw people clear as day. She did, I agreed, voice tight. She used to say people show you who they are, if you watch long enough, like glass transparent if you know what to look for. I should have listened to her warnings sooner. Silence fell for a moment, but it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, forgiving. The truck's rhythm filled the space, steady and comforting, like a heartbeat I could lean on. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt myself breathing without the weight pressing down on my chest. Here was a man I had only just met, and yet in his presence, I felt something my own son had failed to give me for so long: consideration, respect, care without condition. The irony was not lost on me. Sometimes strangers carried more decency in a single gesture than family did in a lifetime. We stopped twice along the way, once for fuel, once for a mandatory break. At a diner attached to the truck stop, Mike ordered us lunch. He waved away my attempt to pay, his eyes crinkling behind those wire-rimmed glasses. You'll do the same for someone else one day, he said, as if it were the most natural truth in the world. Evening slowly draped itself across the plains. As we neared Springfield, familiar shapes began to rise against the horizon. Silhouettes I had known for decades, the water tower, the aging billboards, the curve of the roads that led home. My pulse quickened, not with joy, with inevitability. There, I said, pointing at the exit sign ahead. That's my turnoff. Home sweet home. The words tasted strange, sweet and bitter at once. Home where a reckoning waited, where silence and confrontation would meet. Mike slowed, eased the truck off the interstate. He pulled into a side street, his rig towering, his presence steady until the very last moment. I stepped down from the cab, my feet meeting the familiar pavement of my own neighborhood. My driveway stretched before me, the same concrete path I had walked countless times. But tonight it felt heavier, like the ground itself knew what was coming. I turned once just as Mike's truck rumbled away, its taillights fading around the corner. A stranger who had given me more than my own blood had in years. And then I faced forward. Toward the house. Toward the reckoning. 6:45 in the evening. The sky burned orange at the edges, fading into the purple of oncoming night. Shadows stretched across the lawn I had trimmed and nurtured for decades. Long dark fingers crawling toward the porch I once built with my own hands. Every window of the house blazed with light, as if illumination could hide guilt. They were waiting, watching, anticipating news of the missing grandfather they had so carelessly written off. My key, the same brass key I'd carried for 20 years, slid into the lock with a familiarity that steadied my pulse. The tumblers clicked and the front door swung open. Dad Tobias leapt up from the couch like he'd been shot through with electricity. His performance was flawless, or at least it would have been to a stranger. "Thank God you're safe. We've been searching for hours." His arms twitched like he wanted to embrace me, but the hesitation betrayed him. Joanna appeared beside him, her face sculpted into a masterpiece of counterfeit relief. "We had no idea what happened," she said, her voice dripping with rehearsed concern. "One minute you were there, the next you'd vanished. We've been worried sick." Emily and Lucas broke through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Their joy was untainted innocent. They ran to me, their little arms wrapping tightly around my waist. Their warmth was real, their happiness pure. They were the only ones in this house untouched by deceit. I bent down and hugged them close. "I missed you too," I whispered, though my eyes never left Tobias. Then, standing tall again, I let my words cut the air with surgical precision. 47 phone calls suggest you weren't searching," I said evenly. "You were panicking." For a flicker of a second, Tobias's mask slipped. Confusion rippled across his face before he snapped back into character. "Dad, we called because we were desperate to find you." "You must be confused. We would never." "The note on the refrigerator explains everything." I interrupted, my tone quiet but razor sharp. Color drained from Joanna's face like water running off a canvas. She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me with eyes sharp as broken glass. "We have no idea what you mean," she lied, her voice brittle. "We've been driving back and forth on that highway for hours." I pulled out my phone, my thumb steady as I opened the recording from July 5th. The room filled with Tobias's unmistakable voice, calm and casual, sealing his own fate. "This trip idea is perfect. We'll drive through those desert areas in New Mexico." Then Joanna's chilling calculation followed. "And if something happens to him out there, well, old people get confused. They wander off." The air thickened. Silence pressed heavy against the walls. Emily stepped back, her joy draining into confusion. Lucas's wide eyes darted between his parents and me, sensing a storm he couldn't comprehend. "I have recordings," I said, my voice steady but lined with steel. "Your voices, your plan, your greed. Every word about solving the dad problem and inheriting this house." Tobias's mask crumbled. Desperation bled through his words. "Dad, family forgives. We can work through this. Think about Emily and Lucas. They need their grandfather." I shook my head slowly, the weight of betrayal heavier than the desert sun. "You stopped being my son the moment you planned to murder me." My voice dropped quiet as a blade slipping between ribs. "You have 1 hour. Pack your belongings. Leave this house forever." Joanna's mask shattered completely, venom spilling out at last. "You can't throw us out. We have legal rights. We've lived here for 3 years. "As my guests," I said, lifting my phone so the glow of the screen lit my face. "Guests who plotted to kill their host." I tapped the device once. "My lawyer receives copies of everything if I don't check in daily. Try me." The clock on the mantel ticked in the suffocating silence. Each second carried the weight of judgment. Tobias and Joanna stood frozen, their empire of lies collapsing brick by brick. Behind me, Emily and Lucas clung to my side, their innocence anchoring me in the storm. The reckoning had arrived. "Try to harass me," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass, "and you'll discover just how seriously the authorities take elder abuse and attempted murder." Silence blanketed the room for a moment, broken only by the frantic shuffle of feet as Tobias and Joanna scrambled to their bedroom. The next hour bled away in a haze of muffled arguments and hurried zippers. Drawers slammed shut, bags thumped against the floor. Their whispers turned into hisses, their guilt boiling into blame as they packed their lives into suitcases. Emily's small sobs pierced through the chaos. She clutched her favorite stuffed animal, the fur damp with tears, while Lucas tried to be brave, carrying his little backpack as though he were embarking on some great adventure instead of being dragged from his home. I lowered myself onto my knees beside them, feeling the ache in my bones, but refusing to let them see anything but strength. "Listen to me," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's damp cheek. "This is not your fault. This is about choices your parents made, not about you." My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "One day when you're older, you'll understand. And when that time comes, you can visit me whenever you like. My door will always be open to you." Emily sniffled and nodded, clutching me tightly as though trying to memorize the feel of my arms. Lucas whispered, "I'll miss you, Grandpa." And those 4 words cut deeper than any betrayal Tobias could ever deliver. Then came the final act. Car doors slammed shut outside, sharp and final, like a judge's gavel. Engines roared to life, headlights flared against the dark, and then the red glow of taillights drifted away into the Springfield twilight until they were swallowed whole by the night. I stood alone in the silence that followed the house, suddenly cavernous and strange. The refrigerator door caught my eye, the same door where my warning note had hung like a shield. Now it was bare, a silent witness to the storm that had passed. On the counter sat Martha's favorite mug, the one she always used for evening tea. My hand trembled as I picked it up, memories flooding back of her laughter, her warmth, her way of making this house a home. I filled it with hot water steam, rising into the empty kitchen, and carried it to the table we had shared for so many years. It was a table meant for 2. Tonight it was set for 1. I sat down, staring into the rippling surface of the tea, and let the weight of the day settle around me. There was sadness, yes, but beneath it something steadier. Peace. Resolve. The house was safe again. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll call the lawyer anyway. Some lessons can't be left to fade. They need to stick, burned into memory like a scar, a reminder of how close betrayal had come to victory and how it failed. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. And if you want to hear another powerful tale of betrayal, survival, and justice, just click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.